Okay, we'll go ahead and get started and just kick off the webinar while we wait for more people to join us this afternoon. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Collaborating with Navigation Providers webinar. My name is Luana Brashears. I'll be helping facilitating today's webinar. This webinar is part of the Adventures in Crowdsourcing webinar series and is sponsored by the Federal Highway Administration, EDC 6 Crowdsourcing for Advancing Operations Innovation. Just as a quick reminder, if you don't know already, at NOCO, we offer a variety of resources to support transportation systems management and operations community. So you can go to the NOCO website and then browse through the links for TISMO resources and news. Previous webinar recordings and case studies can be accessed from there as well. And as I mentioned before, today's webinar will be recorded and will be available at NOCO's website later, probably next week. Just a few logistics for today's webinar. So we're recording the webinar and all attendees are encouraged to stay engaged by using the Q&A feature and for questions. And then we also have a chat feature for comments. So both of those are at the bottom of your screen. So make sure you see where those are. And we have a question and answer session at the end of the presentation. So if you have any questions, we encourage you to enter them in the Q&A area as they come up to mind at any time. And then we'll have a Q&A session later after all presentations are done. Also, just please enter your name, title, and agency if you want to say hello to your peers. So you can add those in the chat box. And this is a standard US DOT Federal Highway disclaimer that you see in your screen that reinforces that product names may be used during the webinar, but the US government does not endorse any product. Additionally, views and opinions expressed in this presentation are the presenters and do not necessarily reflect those of Federal Highway Administration. And now I'll hand it over to James Colyar, today's webinar moderator. James, it's all yours.
Great, thanks, Luana. Thanks to you and NOCO for being a great partner with us on this webinar series, Adventures in Crowdsourcing. So I'll give a brief agenda and overview today. Again, my name is James Colyar with Federal Highway Administration Office of Operations, and I'm one of the co-leads along with Ralph Volpe and Greg Jones on the Everyday Accounts Round 6 Crowdsourcing for Advancing Operations initiative. So I'll start out with some FHWA updates on what's new with the crowdsourcing team. And then we have three great speakers for you today. We have Nathan Webster from North Carolina DOT, going to talk about their efforts in crisis response planning and the use of Waze. Pennsylvania Turnpike will be talking about their operations tools to better use Waze data. And finally, last but not least, we'll have Denise Marco from the Eastern Transportation Coalition talking about their efforts with the coalition to improve information delivery for navigation entities such as Waze and Google Maps. And so we'll wrap up with the Q&A. Just to reinforce what Luana said with the disclaimer, we'll be talking about navigation app providers today, but that doesn't mean we're endorsing or sponsoring those products. But as we get into use of crowdsourced data, a public-private partnership is a necessary part of gaining and accessing great crowdsourced data. So here's pictures. I just gave a quick intro on each of our presenters. But again, Nathan Webster, Todd Smith, and Denise Marco, I'll be introducing them more fully as we go into each of their presentations. So you probably know, but in case you don't, Everyday Accounts, or EDC as we call it, is a federal highway program that's really based on states' needs and what they would want to pursue in terms of rapidly deploying proven yet underutilized innovations to achieve a number of goals: shorten project delivery, enhance roadway safety, reduce traffic congestion, and integrate automation. And the crowdsourcing for advancing operations is one of 6 innovations under the EDC Round 6 program that's going on right now in 2021 and 2022. And the crowdsourcing initiative really focuses on 2 of these goals: enhancing roadway safety and reducing traffic congestion. So we do have about 30 states that are participating in our EDC initiative right now. And it's been great to see so many states advancing their state of practice with the use of crowdsourced data. But there's some basic reasons why you might be interested if you're not pursuing crowdsourced data for better operations. First of all, the foundation of operations is really good real-time monitoring of your transportation system and having good situational awareness. And the use of crowdsourced data can give you that. It can increase your ITS infrastructure in terms of having more geographic coverage of your system and more real-time and to reduce the latency of the data that you're getting in so that you can provide more proactive approaches to implementing operational strategies. By doing so, you can also increase safety and reliability. A number of states have improved their ability to detect incidents and reduce the time that it takes to respond to those incidents, and that can all reduce the likelihood of secondary collisions. And then finally, it can save costs. Agencies that leverage crowdsourced data can combine it with their traditional ITS and monitoring equipment and infrastructure in a way that allows them to, at a better cost point, get better coverage of your system. And some agencies are even retiring or replacing their ITS infrastructure with crowdsourced data that can reduce the maintenance burden and costs that go along with that. So just to recap why you would be interested, there's a number of different types of crowdsourced data. We covered a lot of these in other webinars. This is actually the 21st webinar we've done under the Adventures in Crowdsourcing webinar series. So happy to have such a great partnership with NOCO. And maybe it's fitting on September 21st that this is our 21st webinar. But today's webinar is going to be focused on navigation app data. And you'll hear from our presenters how they're leveraging navigation apps not only to better get real-time information about the transportation system in ways that they don't with their current ITS infrastructure, but also it's a two-way street. How are they able to push information that they have about their system to navigation apps that can then be pushed to travelers on the system to give them better information about routing and safety and getting from to their destination more safely and more efficiently. But just to let you know, beyond navigation app, today's focus, there's many other types of crowdsourced data. That crowdsourced data can be applied to many different areas. And so this is also, we've had a number of webinars focusing on individual application areas here. But some of the low-hanging fruit we've seen is crowdsourced data can immediately give you improvement with your traffic incident management and traveler information. And then once agencies kind of realize the use of that, they start to venture into other application areas. And we've seen great examples from state and local agencies in these other application areas for road weather management and arterial management. And not only real-time uses of the data, but you can archive that data for better leveraging it for traffic studies and performance management and performance monitoring reports as well. You know, the list goes on. Anything you do within the realm of traffic or transportation operations, you can use crowdsourced data for. So we've seen applications in all these areas, from freeway management to work zone management, road and ITS maintenance, project prioritization, emergency management, which we're going to kind of focus a little bit on today, and in other applications as well, getting into planning applications and traffic safety applications. So what have we been up to lately? So one thing we've just finished, I'm happy to say we have a training course that's available for anyone to utilize. It's kind of a course in a box, we call it, that anyone could take the materials, got instructor notes, all the slides and presentation materials, an agenda, a webinar flyer, or a workshop flyer that can be sent out as well. If you're interested in this, there's a link on that when you get the presentation that will take you to a link to get you in contact with our team so that we can tell you more about how to deliver that course. It can be delivered anywhere from 1.5 to 4 hours, and virtually and in person. And it's a really great course to get local agencies that may not be as familiar with crowdsourcing and how it can be used to get them more awareness about the possibilities. Another thing I want to highlight is a monthly cohort meeting that we've been having with the states that have and local agencies that have been participating with us. That takes place the fourth Monday of each month at 2 p.m. Eastern. I know a lot of you participate in those cohort meetings. They're small group meetings that we have a different topic each time. So if you're not plugged into those, please let me know. My contact information is at the end here, and we can invite you to those cohort meetings. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and introduce Nathan Webster from the North Carolina DOT. Nathan is a professional engineer. His experience includes automotive R&D at Toyota, and his current role is at the Ncdot Statewide Transportation Operations Center. Nathan currently manages the TIMS and Drive-NC traveler information software, as well as data analytics and reporting. So thanks for joining us, Nathan, and I'll turn it over to you.
Great, thanks, James. Yeah, I'm glad to be able to speak to everyone about this topic. We actually presented this similar material yesterday at the Waze crisis webinar, and so it's been this is good to present it to a wider audience. So I'm going to give an overview of the collaboration of Ncdot with the Waze crisis team for our spring 2022 hurricane drill exercise. So before I talk about this exercise that we did here, I'll explain that Ncdot has been in a partner program with Waze, known as the Waze for Cities program, and that the program we most recently named that, but the program itself has been around since we've been involved since the mid 2010s, and it's a two-way sharing of data. Ncdot provides traffic incident data to Waze via API, and that's shown as the just on the app as the road hazard, which is kind of nice to know, but it doesn't necessarily affect you as much as the forced rerouting that would happen if it was closures. So we're currently working on a closure feed, so we can feed our closures to Waze, and then we do use our Waze data for our traffic incident detection, and as one of our incident detection sources at our traffic operations centers as well. So we've been able to use the data in both directions over the years. We're building capabilities on both directions of those. But for this presentation, there's what I was going to speak about the activities that the Waze crisis team has. Another way that the Waze team has reaching out to DOTs and supporting providing travel information during emergencies, and that's the crisis drill, hurricane or storm emergency weather response drill. So can you have the next slide, please? So before we get into the collaboration with Waze, I just give a brief overview of Ncdot's activities in general in providing traveler information and traffic management during storms such as hurricanes or large winter storms and so on. So there's the before the storm, during the storm, and after the storm. So as the storm arrival is getting imminent, we've got situations where we're building up our staffing plans, making sure that we're able to handle the situation as it comes through. And so one of the important things is make sure that the roads are available and ready to serve the evacuation, should that be needed for some of these coastal cities. Like North Carolina's got the biggest cities, Wilmington, down in the lower part of the map, and I-40 leads directly away. We want to make sure that the roads are open. So we monitor the traffic flow on the roads, and also through the state, even not even here, but like I-77 and I-95 and some of these roads, if there's an evacuation from Florida or places to the south, like, we want to make sure that they don't get stuck in North Carolina too. So keeping the roads open with like a freeway service, using freeway service patrol and other traffic management activities. Okay, let's have the next slide. Thanks. And during the storm, yeah, maintaining the up-to-date road closure information, the navigation portals, Waze, Google Maps, Apple, et cetera, they're going to be showing information to the travelers. One of the activities we do is to make sure that that's showing what's correct. And so we can reach out to them. We've got contacts at each of them. And then we can learn from them too, that it's not rare at all that we'd see something different than ours, where like Waze might report that a bridge is actually open. We can correct our own database as well. So we've done a lot of that during the storms. And another part is the statewide special alert messages. These come onto our drivenc.gov traveler information website as a banner up at the top. And these are useful, just an overall message that everyone wants to know, and also to alert the motorists that, for example, use caution in a winter storm. And then the third one is the IMAP freeway service patrol. So Ncdot can send the patrols to certain areas to keep the roads open and help to clear blockages and such during the time that the storms are they've blocked the roadway. Okay, Vaishali, next slide, please. And then after the storm, we can provide that. We have our data systems that are available to provide the statistics to the media and the administrators, such as the impacted roadways and the status. And yeah, we continue to support the road clearance efforts. Sometimes bridges will be washed out. Things can actually be years in the making before the repairs are underway, but in general, we keep track of the statistics about that and get things back to normal after the storm. Next slide, please. So what we did for this, so that was a little bit in general about Ncdot's storm response activities regarding traffic and traffic information. So what I'm covering today is a drill about that we conducted with Waze. And for this drill, we conducted the drill on May 12th, and we used a fictional storm that was developed as part of North Carolina Emergency Management's drill exercise that they actually had on the previous day. So this was Tropical Storm Bruno, which was scheduled in this fictional scenario, was scheduled to arrive on the 14th, start to impact North Carolina on the 14th, make its way across the state, raining a lot, causing a lot of flash flooding and then riverine flooding, which is when it rains up in the mountains and the water washes its way down. It causes the rivers to rise even days later sometimes. So we mapped out that scenario. Next slide, please. And I mentioned about the NCEM, North Carolina Emergency Management, as one of our sister North Carolina organizations. They provide us with real storms as they're happening, with their own, including using the national information as well as their own meteorology staff to get the hour by hour, sometimes several times a day assessment of what the situation is with these storms that are coming in. And so all the different dimensions you can see, they'll explain about what's happening. And I did mention the traffic impacting ways that storms can impact the roads is storm surge. This is, especially in North Carolina, you've got these inlets that happen to be at the same angle as the spiraling storms, so that we, like during Hurricane Florence, we saw a lot of like high waters of storm surges that can come in. And so there's a lot of like storm surge modeling, and that's some new technology that's being implemented for some of the prediction. But and then the trees down, things like that themselves. Then you've got the flooding of roads, and then the riverine, and also all these different ways that it can impact. So we use this as our example scenario for this training exercise. Okay, next page, please. So this exercise was rather small scale. I mean, it's in its amount of data, what we did with Waze, but we just practiced getting information to Waze so that they could, provide it to the app users as in the case. But this is, of course, it's just a practice. So I'll explain about the data we shared with Waze and the Waze response. So there were three types. There's the road closures. Shelters are available by Waze. We opted out of using them for this exercise just because NCDOT doesn't maintain the list. It's maintained by FEMA. And so we generally point to that information. We actually ingest the API of that in our travel information website, Drive NC. But for Waze, when the time comes, Waze crisis team could generally just get it from FEMA as well, and we can help them with that. But we didn't include it in this exercise. And then the evacuation zones is the third type. So I'll cover that in the next few slides. So the road closures is the bread and butter of the traffic information. It's what the most basic thing that we do is make roads that are open should be shown as open, roads that are closed should be shown as closed, and the navigation portals and so on. And so for this exercise, there's no actual test tier or QC portal of Waze. Like, it is what it is, like the Waze app and everything. So the backend systems, the way around this that the Waze crisis team has us do is we can enter the closures or have them enter the closures in the app in the future, some amount, like 2 days ahead. So that's what we, in our case, we did that with the example closure. And as always keep saying this is a drill throughout when you're doing the exercise. That's and yeah, Waze has their events page. So this was a dedicated events page that Waze made as well. Okay, next slide. Yeah, so the other type of information was the evacuation zone that we sent them a polygon based on where we saw that sample storm heading. Some region that was more severely devastated, that the agency administrators made the decision that this was a place that people shouldn't drive, with the exception of emergency vehicles and so on. And so we want to discourage the motorists from even going to those areas. So the way the new feature that Waze makes available is a polygon called a no drive polygon that can be it works to, so the no drive polygon works to discourage the motorists from going to or through that region by putting up a warning pop-up. So that's how that works. So we did that as well. I'll show the specific cases and how the Waze team responded in the next slides. So for the road closures, the Waze crisis team created the mock event on the Waze Map Editor, and they also maintained a Google map listing the road closures. So here's an example. This is the road closure we sent to them, just a bridge north of Wilmington on US 74. So we showed this is closed, and it was entered in the Waze Map Editor and in the Google Map. And it's yeah, pretty much that's, so we got confirmation that it was entered. That's next slide, please. And then the no drive zone, we made a GeoJSON data formatted Polygon and sent that to the Waze crisis team as well. And so that would, it never got a chance to be used because it was in the future, but the data transfer mechanics and so on were achieved. And that was also entered in the Google map. So had that been active in like a real storm, that Polygon would be working to discourage people from traveling to or through those areas. Next slide. So this is the final summary slide. Takeaways. Engaging this with Waze in this drill was a success, and we definitely got more familiar with the current ways that the Waze crisis team can help us, as well as ways that we can interact with the Waze that features like sending data to Waze and so on. And so we're definitely more ready to pursue the travel information situation with these storms. And so with the Waze crisis team, if you do get involved in them in your agency, you have the opportunity to specify your person of contact at the agency regarding Waze, and specifically for emergencies. And in your case, if you have shelters or evacuation zones, be sure to tell about that. And you will be able to learn about the reporting tools and the data feeds. So that's some of the things to do. And then the Waze crisis team itself, the contact address is this email at the bottom, waze-crisis@google.com. And the crisis team is available 24/7 to support natural and man-made events such as earthquakes, fires, hurricanes, floods, bridge collapses, fuel shortages, or world conflicts. They're here to handle it all. But if you want to do an exercise, be sure to let them know at least 2 weeks in advance, and be sure to gather up other stakeholders if you've got different municipalities or different sub-agencies that work with you. Be sure to bring everybody in, and it makes a better exercise. So that's the end of my presentation. I'll pass it back over to James.
All right, great. Thanks, Nathan. Very informative, and sounds like it was a very useful exercise that you did. So it's good to know that is an option and a good way to be prepared for case. Hopefully it never happens, but if there ever is an emergency like that.
Yep.
So please type in the questions. We will take the questions and do the Q&A session at the end. And at this point, I want to bring up our next speaker, Todd Smith with the Pennsylvania Turnpike Commission. He's been with the Turnpike for nearly 20 years, supporting the Traffic Operations Center. Todd is a level 3 Waze editor and a Google level 5 local guide. So that's impressive. Todd began his career with the Emergency Management 911 Center in central Pennsylvania. Thanks for joining us, Todd, and I'll hand it over to you.
All right, thank you very much. Glad to be here this afternoon representing the Pennsylvania Turnpike Commission. Sharing a little bit about what mainly our Traffic Operations Center uses crowdsourced data for. It mainly comes from Waze at this point. You can go ahead and move to the next slide, please. It's not the only place we get that information from. We do get some information from our state's 511 system. Users of that system can submit emails or phone calls. That usually goes to PennDOT's Statewide Traffic Management Center. We will then in turn usually get an email or phone call. It's usually in reference to debris on the roadway or something of that nature, which we can dispatch our folks to take care of. We also get miscellaneous reports to our Traffic Operations Center's Twitter account as well. We've had reports of stuff going on the roadway that they've been able to dispatch folks out to immediately. But the main source we get feeds from, as Nathan mentioned, the data sharing with Waze. We've been a partner with them for a long time. We were the 11th partner to join the program quite a long time ago. That is a two-way feed. Fortunately with them, we share information to them, they share it back. We'd like to be able to do that as well with Google, Apple if possible, but we currently share our feed to them. They ingest our data into Google and Apple, but we don't get anything back from them at this point. So it's basically one way. Show there in our slide was kind of an eerie picture there. If you could go back just for 1 second, please. I was just making a point that was, I had to get that picture in there. That was from early 2020 when our operations center sort of went silent. We had to separate our day shift and night shift teams from each other. And that was the first time that that center was empty. You normally don't see nobody sitting in those seats there, but it's kind of an eerie moment due to COVID. We separated folks to make them a little safer and make sure we had sufficient staff. Next slide, please. The Waze incident reporting. Everything comes through the little button on the app when folks indicate something's going on out along the roadway. They come in. We do have a Waze dashboard. We ingest the API from Waze. It gets all different kinds of reports there, whether it's a car on the shoulder, car on the roadway, construction. We can see all those reports populating that dashboard. It also gives us a chance to see that the three factors that are assigned to every Waze report or incident that goes in there. They use the kind of the points incentive. If you've used the Waze app to get folks to use it, you get so many points if it's a vehicle on the shoulder, if you report gas prices, etc. But if you're someone in there as part of the points game, you're putting fake incidents in there, your reliability is going to be lower over time. So you may not make our list here. Got to be at least a reliability of 5, combined with the rating and confidence, thumbs up, thumbs down, everything of that nature plays into those rankings. So we can filter those out and see a little more information as to what's going on with the reports coming in. Next slide, please. What we've been using as the most part in our traffic operations center, as far as Waze reports, what you see on the screen there is a little snippet from our ATMS system, Advanced Traffic Management System we have and we use. We can see that alert is on the upper right-hand portion of that screen of the Waze report. It includes what roadway it's on and the milepost. And then our supervisors in the operations center can hit the little locate button there and it will zoom in to show what's on the map there. It shows where it's populating at the milepost. And as you're seeing on this image here, that's the Google map layer showing Google traffic, which shows them that there's a good chance something is going on there. A lot of these do come in before we will get the emergency call from our star 11 line or from a county 911 center. The average is basically 4 minutes ahead of those calls. We have seen as high as 11 minutes in some rural areas to actual incidents. Some of those times you don't see anything wrong in the traffic layer because they're less populated areas. But they can compare that to the Google layer or the NRIX layer. Most of the TOC folks prefer the Google layer. They believe that to be a little more reliable and accurate. So they can go ahead then and promote this incident to light up a DMS for stopped or slow traffic ahead for folks out on the roadway. And we can also populate our CAD system. Currently, that's manual. Next slide, please. So if they promote that to the CAD system, then we can dispatch state police, one of our maintenance units, Geico Safety Patrol. They can go out and check out what's going on out there. If there's something going on, or maybe it's nothing. Sometimes it's a disabled vehicle. But we do something with those alerts and get help out minutes sooner. It helps us clear the roadway a little more quickly out there sometimes. And as the future things we'd like to do, within our ATMS system based on the last screen you saw. We're currently requesting that those alerts always go to the top of the screen. They look a little different, maybe. They stand out, and audible alerting, that's within our ATMS system. But and as far as our future CAD that we're looking forward to, we look forward to direct Waze integration into that system as well. So the dispatchers in our operations center can have those alerts come in, and we can generate those incidents automatically without that having to be a manual process. Next slide, please. Basically, we're showing you what happens with the feeds that come in to our operations center. Now we'll switch gears here into the API that gets generated by our ATMS system in the traffic operations center. So any construction, we keep track of all the road work on the Pennsylvania Turnpike, all 564 miles of it now. Sure, it's not as many as some of the state DOTs, but these APIs that go out for the road work or for the incidents that occur on the Turnpike, they populate in 511. They go out to the state 511 system. They're in there. They go out, of course, to the Waze live map, and of course to every Waze user that's out there. I showed a snippet there, Google Maps. Those alerts are going out to Google Maps as well. And I did check Apple. I don't have that screenshot in there, but it was indicated in there too. John Parker has done a lot for our agency to get that stuff accomplished, get it out there to more than just one app. So our information's out there to be a little more accurate across whatever platform you're using out there. Get a hold of some more folks out there on the roadway. Next slide. Our Waze closures may be done a little bit differently than some other agencies. As a partner with Waze, we do have different avenues to use as far as closures go. Our closures are currently entered by TOC staff or management or supervisors in there. We do it directly in the Waze Map Editor. We go in there, and once we enter those closures, if it's an unplanned incident occurs right now, we can go in there, close down a segment of roadway. If you're navigating with Waze, if you're using Waze, you better be navigating. Don't just be turning it on and looking at what's on the screen. Make sure you put your destination in there, or else you're not getting bang for your buck, even though it's free. You'll get rerouted immediately. I know sometimes that's difficult, especially on our roadway. If you're actually on the system already, as long as there's an exit prior to the closure, you're in good shape. But sometimes that can be a little more frustrating when you get stuck in a queue out there along the roadway. Most of the closures that we enter directly into WME, we found they will have an end time over in Google Maps. As part of what goes in to the Waze Map Editor, when you have to enter a expiration time for the closure, and Google seems to be ingesting that end time, and they will actually put the closure in until then. And it's a little bit of source of frustration sometimes when our closures come out before that end time. That closure may remain in Google Maps. We've been trying to work on that. John Parker's been working on that for us. We do have an email contact with Google now to address some of those situations, but those things do happen. Another part of the closure scenario is our pre-planned closures. And, we enter those. You like to enter them at least a week prior to the actual closure. You put them in the Waze Map Editor. And then, as Nathan mentioned earlier, Waze has what's considered an event map. You can actually go in and see what events are across your state, if there's road closures coming up or something of that nature. But we enter those events as well. You associate the closure with the event, and Waze will send you an email, usually within a few hours after you enter it, if you enter it enough days in advance. And it will send out push notifications to users of the app. Next screen, please. And it's a little snippet from the Waze Map Editor on the left. Depending on your zoom level in the Waze Map Editor, it'll show you different events that are either ready to go or pending. We enter them through there. If you get it done well enough in advance of the closure, you see there, I showed a little snippet from an email. You get the email from Waze saying, thanks for submitting that traffic event. And they're going to alert folks, within a certain time before the closure. Next slide, please. Those push notifications, as long as you have the push notifications selected in Waze, if you like being bugged, no matter what it is, and you're really into Waze, you'll get that push notification to your lock screen. That's the first image there. You can also then click on that and you'll see information specifically on the road closure. If you are attempting to travel through the area, this scenario on the right here, I attempted to travel through an area like leaving a couple hours in advance of the closure, but Waze was still letting you know you were going to run into delays due to a closure that was coming up there. And they put those out, I believe it's 3 different ways, no pun intended there. If you've traveled through that section of roadway within, I think it's the last 60 or 90 days, you will get that alert. They also use a radius for that, and if you attempt to navigate through it. Next slide. Other benefits that we've had as far as using the Waze Map Editor and being involved with the editing community over at Waze is long-term construction zones. Having quite a few on the Turnpike, but we can go in there and we have the editing community that will reduce that speed limit from 70 down to 55. That way, when users are using the app and traveling through there, they will get that alert that the speed limit is reduced, assisting our folks out along the roadway, help keeping them a little more safe. We currently have a service plaza that they're replacing the fuel tanks. We can actually go into the Waze Map Editor and we put that plaza out of service. So no one tries to navigate there. We can update amenities if we have new electric vehicle charging stations, etc. Plazas change names, businesses at the plazas change names. We can go in and change that immediately. Immediate navigation via new segments of roadway. I'll give props to Waze there. I've seen no other app be close to them as far as navigation is concerned. We did it years ago for the Interstate 95 connector there. And most recently, our new section of PA 576. We go in and have that mapped correctly. The exit numbers are right, speed limits are right. And the day the section of roadway opens, our supervisors or management staff goes in and removes the closures. If you're navigating, you can go right through that, be navigated right through that section of roadway. And as well, there are navigation issues that get reported. If you've used the Waze app, you can go in there and report problems with your travel, etc. You could say the speed limit isn't right, or new ramp segments sometimes get, updated and something may be missed. But we can actually go in and monitor what those users out on the roadway are saying in these reports, or if one of the other editors in the state is responding to a user report on our roadway, they can reach out to us via channel and ask us what's going on there, if we know of anything going on, and just helps resolve any issues more quickly. Next slide, please. I was asked to speak a little bit about the volunteer time since I had to include it in my short bio here at the beginning, but aside from using it as part of the Turnpike Commission, this sort of got me involved in a little volunteer time use of being a Waze editor. I mentioned earlier, James mentioned I was a level 3 editor. You start out as a level 1 editor if you just start using the app, and you can basically edit within a mile radius of where you drive. And when you become level 2, it's 2 miles. And level 3 is 3 miles. Edit meaning businesses change, new roadways get placed into a new development, stuff like that. It may not be on the map. You get the opportunity to go in and help name those or place a business out of service. So a lot of businesses, unfortunately, have gone out of business here in the last couple of years. You can go in and update that so people don't try to navigate there. I spent a lot of time doing that stuff because you see things that are wrong in the app. You say, geez, they got to fix this. Well, I say this, and with my knowledge of the backside, it was like, well, I can go in and do this. So I've done it on my spare time. And Nathan was talking about earlier, the crisis response. I put a little snippet in there from our Discord server that the volunteers at the Waze editing community use. When they have a natural disaster or emergency situation, as they do in North Carolina sometimes, in the South due to hurricanes, editors can go in, on your volunteer time and assist with closures. They basically, they'll put a spreadsheet of all the roadways or locations of the segments that are closed, and it's up to us to go in and close it. They open up an area of the map for specific people. If you signed up to help, you'll go in there and you'll have access to a Google Doc, and you can update that you closed that roadway and so forth. That's how these things get done. It's a lot. You get a lot of reports, other things like that through there. I think I did include that. Oh, I didn't. I did include the little slide, but as Nathan was mentioned, I had a little snip from if you go into the app and you attempt to navigate into an evacuation zone, you do actually have a little clip of that, because I tried that one time, and it does pop up a thing. Are you sure you want to go? This is an evacuation area. We recommend you don't travel here. But and same with Google Maps. They don't have everything right. If you ever use the Waze app and you're searching for a destination, if you're using the instant response that pops up as you type, that's all being provided by Google. Unfortunately, Google's addresses aren't always right. No point. People navigate clicking one of those quick responses. They go there and the location is not correct. And of course, Waze gets blamed, but it's really coming from Google. So as part of the editing community, you get to go over there and you get to correct Google on what they have wrong too. So I've done that quite a few times, and it just helps out. It helps people navigating, but that's what I do a little bit on some free time. That basically wraps up what I had to share with you for today. Next slide and last slide.
Great, thanks, Todd. Great presentation, and like the meme there. So great example of an agency getting more directly involved in engaging with navigation providers, with Waze as the TOC operators and managers becoming Waze Map Editors themselves. So that's definitely one avenue to consider if you want to get more deeply involved with a two-way communication with a navigation provider like Waze. So please, again, if you have any questions for Todd, he's got a lot of expertise in this area. Type them in the Q&A pod, and we'll get to them in the Q&A session at the end. So right now, let's go ahead and transition to our last speaker, Denise Marco with the Eastern Transportation Coalition. She has been the TSMO director there for over 5 years. And in that role, she works with over 200 member agencies on TSMO strategies. Prior to her involvement with the coalition, she was with the New Hampshire DOT for 22 years, serving as the state's first TSMO administrator, where she managed the traffic operations center there. She is also currently the chairman of the board of directors for ITS New England. So it's a great privilege, Denise, to have you on our webinar today and sharing some insights that you and your partners have been working on engaging with navigation providers. So I'll turn it over to you, Denise.
Thanks, James. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Welcome. Thank you. I'm glad to be here, and great presentation. Some of what I'm going to say may sound redundant, which means that the two speakers ahead of me are definitely on the right track, but let's get started. Could I have the next slide, please? Okay, so basically what happened was, in talking about our goal of what we call rebalancing DOTs with big tech, I think the use of the third-party mapping navigation apps is becoming more and more prevalent every day. So the agencies within the Eastern Transportation Coalition started to discuss how they could become more involved and be able to inject like the DOT needs directly into the third-party product roadmaps. And so the question was how to start doing that. And we looked at approximately 9 different mapping companies. Waze is not on that because in this particular slide, because we chose Waze as our first target, so to speak. But the thought process is that we could successfully approach Waze, all 18 agencies, core agencies working together as one unified voice, then we would have a roadmap to be able to work with the other companies seen moving forward. So that was the kind of the overarching game plan. So we started the process of how to approach Waze. And what we did was we ended up, we held a technical workshop, and we had representatives from 14 of our member states there. They created a technical memo talking about things they would like to see in terms of data being brought out to the travelers. We got sign off from all of our executives in our executive board, our CEOs, every one of them from all our member states, which I think was pretty powerful impact. And then we approached Waze with this request to say, we'd like to work together to improve your app and get better traveler information data out there. And they responded, yep, to validate our choice. They said, yes, we'd like to. So next slide, please. To validate the choice of starting with Waze, they shared with us this metric. This was back when we first started working with them. Basically, it talks about the first column deals with the states. You've got some peak active daily users, off-peak users, but basically the bottom line was that when you look at these user metrics, they dwarf most agency 511 stats. So by choosing Waze to start out with, I think we had made a good first pick. Next slide, please. So what we had to do, and again, I'm looking at this from a global, multi-agency level. We asked, okay, what agencies, what are you sending to Waze? What exactly, are you sending? And it turns out only a quarter of our members really communicated with Waze via a live feed. Okay. Todd spoke a lot about the Map Editor, the tool of the Map Editor, which is more of a manual. A lot of this discussion has to do with live feeds and API feeds, but you could see that most of the states had signed the Waze for Cities agreement, but many of them and most of them didn't have a working partner data feed at the time we started. There were about 6 states, North Carolina being one of them, and the Pennsylvania Turnpike also being one of them, but most of them didn't have a working data feed. And that middle column that talks about non-working partner data feed talks about some of those feeds that were up and running were no longer running due to changes or issues. So there were challenges there. And the last column talks about a road closure tool. Most of them weren't using the road closure tool in Waze, and those that said yes had no parent report. So there was a lot of disconnect, I guess is what I want to say. It's what we had what was being sent back and forth, I guess. So we had to get everybody on the same page. So the next step we did, next slide, please, is we asked Waze, what are agencies really sending to you via a feed? Because some states, Georgia may have said something like, yes, we're sending data to Waze. Delaware may have said, I don't remember, we were sending data to Waze, but in actuality, at the time we started working directly with Waze, and we were working not only with their product team, but their engineering team. This chart actually shows about there were 6,400 alerts within a 6-week period back in November when we first started working with them in 2020. And these were the 6 states that were actually sharing data with Waze. So Maine, New Hampshire, and Vermont all share the same ATMS system. But the other 3, Massachusetts, North Carolina, and PA Turnpike, were on track, and we're really sending data to Waze via the multiple feeds like you just saw from Todd. So when we talked to the states and we talked to Waze, some of the questions we were asking them were simple, like, what are you using the Map Editor tool directly? Because if you're using the Map Editor tool, it wouldn't show up in a feed many times. Or if you're integrating Waze into your ATMS system, are you doing it on the front end, bringing the Waze data in, using it in your system and pushing it out on the other end, other applications? Or are you simply taking your verified ATMS events, pushing them out to Waze that way? So we had to figure out how the states were thinking they were sending data. And working on these processes, we figured out maybe we need to talk about data standardization. How could we get to a better place where we're all literally sending the data, what I call the same fire hose? Right, next slide, please. So in our data standardization efforts, and these have been going on for about 1.5 years, all righty, we really kind of whittled down to the fact that we want to work with the WZDX format, and we want to work with the University of Maryland RIDIS feed. And the idea behind that is that if we can get a common type of data feed that's being sent to Waze that all of the states, our member states, can take advantage of, we would all get the same type of data out there. So when you look at the chart, when we first started, and as you saw, there was very few that were sending data. Well, this is the current status right now, where you have, for example, Massachusetts has a live feed right now. Rhode Island's feed is active. Connecticut and New Jersey and New York, their feed is active. So we've started from maybe 6 states, and we're started to move to the point where we have more states providing incident data. And I speak to the fact that this is what they call incident data. I don't want to call it news data, but it's like there's a crash, there's a construction project, there's a pothole, but it didn't have any closure information. It didn't have any routing information or lane impact or lane configuration information. So I'll get to that in a second, but the idea was we took the first path of let's get the incident data feeds up and running, getting them active, so that at least we're getting some data out there to Waze through our operations centers. You'll notice that in the chart, it also says things like Massachusetts had nearly 89,000 impressions on Waze users, or Rhode Island 21,000 impressions in March. Next slide, please. I'm going to tell you what that's about. So an alert is different from an impression. So the impression, if I define a Waze impression, all right, and I want to note that impressions have dramatically increased in Waze because of the work that we're doing with the incident feed, is that a Waze impression is when a user sees like a piece of content. If a Waze user adds a hazard icon, a vehicle stopped on the shoulder ahead, and it runs through the algorithm and it gets posted on the app, on the app, a certain number of drivers that are read out they're read out a message verbally, they pass a pin, that's called an impression. So the idea behind this, as you can see, we did a 6-week interval just of this year, May and June, and about 10 million alert impressions made on Waze users from these partners. You can see the partners that are really doing a lot of powerful work in terms of sending data out and through the app that the users are seeing. Okay. Let me go next slide, please. Now I'm going to switch gears a little bit. We have, and again, we meet twice a year with the Waze product and engineering teams, once typically in June, once in December. And we have 2 concurrent paths that we're working on. One of them is the data and the data standardization path I was speaking about. But also we've got something called product enhancements. And the idea behind that is that if we want to help inject what we need and what we want them to show on their app, and we have to be very careful when we do this because it's a free app. We're not paid. We don't pay them to do this. We have to be very careful in how we do this. We talked about how could we get dynamic speakable hazards, a new product feature or enhancement implemented into the system so that it speaks to you. It's not an alert. Let's say it's not something you have to look at. It speaks to you. The challenge is going to be with the second initiative is that the speakable hazards allows users to receive the audible alerts. And it's designed for events such as work zones or lane shifts or emergency routing. But the important piece, and I think that Todd and Nathan also hit on it earlier, is that they're looking at road closure and lane impact information. They don't necessarily have all of that. They're ready to launch this new feature. The infrastructure has been built to do it, but they can only do so effectively with access to that type of road closure and lane impact data. Now, again, I'm speaking through the work that's done through feeds, not necessarily through the manual map editors, because you can send them closures that way. Alrighty. So again, devil's in the details on how we do this, but we're trying to get this. Waze has accepted the WZDX standard data format. They said that they can take data within that format and push it forward. And then we're working with RIDIS and the University of Maryland RIDIS platform, again, another analytics platform to get data road closure and lane impact data pushed to them. But again, it's a process. The current, so basically one more slide, please, before the next slide, please. So what we talk about these audible speakable hazards, and we talk about road closures, we talk about lane impacts. What they mean, what Waze really means is that currently right now, the alert structure, the way it's set up in the app, it forces the reporter to choose between a full closure, a lane closed alert, doesn't have much additional information, or all other type of alerts. There's no really information about lane impact. So what they're doing is to work on improving the structure to give the better info to drivers. So it gives them a reason and an impact of the alerts they see. So as I mentioned, they're ready to ingest what we call structured lane impact as additional info for various types of feeds. For example, it might look like this. The alert type would be an accident. Lane impact would tell you which number of lanes is closed. Once they start to get that type of data from the states, then they're going to look at updating lane closure indication on the UI and lane closure incorporating in the driving guidance. So I think in a nutshell, that's kind of the current state of our work with Waze. There's a lot more work to still be done, but we've made really great strides in getting incident data, like the crashes and the congestion and the work zones out to them. And the next step is going to focus on how to get better closure data, as well as structured lane impact information to them via the data feeds. Okay, next slide, please. So then we said, okay, we're on a good path with Waze. Tomorrow Waze is going to be in the room of a meeting I've got. They're very engaged. But we decided to do more data digging and say, okay, we started asking more questions to the agencies about who should we approach next? Who's the next target on that? Because there's 9 of them, nine of these mapping companies. What's the next target? Is it Google Maps? So last October, we held a workshop where we evaluated a survey that we put out to the agencies. And this survey basically asked about these 5 product feature facets and how the agencies were using them. So we asked about map segments. And what that means is that, for example, updating the base map. What do you use for updating your base map, or adding roads or deleting roads? We asked about permanent hazards, giving information to drivers about things like long-term construction or icy bridges or safety messages. And then we talked about, what do you use for real-time incidents? What do you use for driver routing? What do you use for travel time data? Came back with a whole bunch of information from all of our agencies. Next slide, please. So what we found in the survey was that this chart basically says is a proportion of platform users who use platform for each facet. So when you look at this, you look at Waze, you can see that 100% of the agencies who responded, and those were all of our members, use Waze in some manner, shape, or form to look at real-time incidents. So we felt almost vindicated or validated, whatever you want to call it, that starting with Waze was the great approach to use. We then saw map segments. Okay, Google, almost 90% of the agencies are using Google map segments. So that's where we're going to start. The next slide, please. The interesting piece of this, though, is that when we took each of those facets and we looked at this, giving map segments, when you look at this chart, you can see here that the Google is the most used. Okay, it was most used, but it's also the least effective and the least relied upon. So what does that mean? Reliance is how hard a TMC leans on a capability. In other words, how much do TMCs count on a particular use of a navigation app? Okay. On the other hand, effectiveness is how does a facet function? All right. In other words, something can work well, but not be used by a TMC much. In other words, the TMC can use a facet, but it can be improved by a facet can be improved. So we said, this is leverage here. Google's used, it's the most used, but it's the least effective and the least relied upon. We have an opening to go and outreach to Google Maps. Next slide, please. Then we also had, next slide. Here we go. Then also we had kind of had this happen back in January of this year, January 3rd and 4th. We had that interesting snowstorm, January 3rd and 4th on I-95. I'm sure some of you remember motorists stranded for 27 hours. When you have senators that are stranded on a corridor, it's never a good thing. And so the problem statement that we were able to approach Google with was to say, open an IRL, which means open in real life. It's closed on Google via automation. A lot of the closures happen via literally AI. It was 6 hours to get the corridor reopened, massive impact, political attention, the whole 9 yards. So there was a lot of pressure all of a sudden on what I've seen in the chat box, how Google doesn't always get it right. Google Maps it's not always correct. How do we fix that? Now, Waze is owned by Google. You would think that the Waze feeds, which tend to be a lot more precise, would be something that Google would just take on and capture. Not always fact. So next slide, please. What we did was we approached Google, and we approached Google, again, the same almost methodology, technical memo, a signature from our CEOs, and said, we want to talk and we want to work with you. We've been working with Waze. They knew about this, but we said, this is our objective. The roadways that are open in real life and appear as closed in Google Maps are able to be removed in operationally acceptable timeframes. So we are looking for, we call it the Google Escape Pod. We would like to have Google, I guess is the word, select or confirm that we have authoritative sources within each of our agencies who can go onto a Google map and remove an erroneous closure. Todd, I think you from Turnpike, you might be able to already do that, but that's what we're looking for. So we're in the process right now of gathering who are called authoritative sources who will be able to go in and approved by Google, who could go in so that when you have a ramp closed for 6 days, and you can't reach anybody because no one responds to you, you can have an authoritative source who can go in and get that removed. These are the key results that we're trying to do. We're trying to reduce time from identification of incorrect closure to removal. We'd like to do that in less than 5 minutes if we can. We have an authoritative source. Google Maps can log instances of error to measure current problem, and Google Maps can reduce instances of error caused by automation. This is kind of where we're going with Google right now. Next slide, please. So, and this is what it would look like. So the idea is an authoritative source could get in there, could take out that erroneous closure if need be. Next slide, please. And so in summary, we've done a lot of great work with Waze. We're building a very strong relationship with them, and we're starting to build that same relationship with Google. In summary, looking ahead, I think we need to continue our work with the feeds, the data feeds that we're doing, get better at standardizing with the WZDX format, and then adding new feeds to increase user impact so they can get what we call the lane configuration, lane impact, closure data, and then explore more opportunities. With that being said, that's the presentation.
All right, great. Thanks, Denise.
You're welcome.
A lot of activity you and the coalition members are doing in this area. So it's exciting to see you guys kind of blazing a trail in this area that is definitely difficult to navigate. So thanks, Denise. Some questions came in. If we can go to the next slide, we'll try to get to some of these questions. I think we have a poll question first, though. So let you read that poll question. So now that you've heard from our three presenters, we want to take a moment and ask, whether your agency or client that you work for uses crowdsourced data for their operations, and if yes, if you don't mind sharing your agency name and what data type do you use. I think you can select more than one there. Thanks, Luana. There's 3 questions, so you may have to scroll down, and then maybe we reach out to you to include your agency in the FHWA EDC6 crowdsourcing applications list, which we have currently a list of applications on our website that we like to update and keep it updated as much as we can. I think Vaishali is bringing that up now. It's on our EDC6 website. It's just a sample. It's not comprehensive, but there are good examples we'd like to add them if we can. I don't know if everyone can see that, but I saw it might be blocked by the poll question. Just give another few seconds to answer the poll question, and then we will close that poll question. Okay, so Luana, can you close the poll? Thank you for answering that. If you're able to do that. So again, go to our EDC, FHWA EDC6 crowdsourcing for operations website. And all of our resources are there, including the application list. It's a table, sample applications, if you want to learn more. So let's go ahead and go to our Q&A session. I know a lot of questions came in. It's a very interesting topic and perplexing topic for many agencies, how to navigate this world of private navigation apps providing routing information for travelers of the transportation system that you manage and maintain. So how do we work best with them? So let's maybe we'll start from the start here. I know some questions came in for Nathan, and those questions were also maybe applicable to other folks as well. So, and Nathan, I see you did answer some of them, but I know it's hard to give a good answer with a 1 or 2 sentence summary. So maybe I'll start with you, Nathan, and then let the others chime in if they want to. There was questions about the no drive zone Polygon that you mentioned, and how that could be used for emergency evacuation zones, and can that possibly use for other applications like cutting down the amount of cut through traffic in neighborhoods and things like that. So Nathan, do you want to give a little bit more detail about how that could be set up and used, and the appropriate uses for that?
Yeah, thanks, James. This is kind of you can call it a loaded topic. It's probably one of the most commonly asked topics. I really don't have a good official answer about any fixed dedicated procedure by Waze or by Google Maps or any of the others for that matter about this topic, about the cut through traffic. Things in the, regarding the no drive Polygon, that's not what it was intended for. To us, it seems like a new feature. I think the first time I heard about the no drive Polygon was in March when the Waze crisis team introduced it. So I don't, the answer for that is no. It's this topic of the cut through traffic with navigation providers such as Waze, like I think it's a whole other topic. I know Brendan Kaplan was formerly from the MTA. He's a collaborator with the Eastern Transportation Coalition. He gave a webinar with Eastern ETC last year about, he'd been doing some special work with some of the municipalities in New Jersey to analyze the cut through traffic using Waze. There's nothing, this isn't on the user side, but the Waze app has, it's called the Waze traffic viewer. But it's more than just a viewer. It actually gives you the alternate routes that Waze gives to drivers at any OD pair. So you can see cases, you can actually capture the situations where Waze was telling drivers to go off route. I know some of those places in New Jersey where you head toward the George Washington Bridge, it's a concern for them, I know. So yeah, so that's, but this could be a whole other webinar for that question. I really don't have answers about that, about how can agencies use Waze or other providers to discourage cut through traffic. I don't know. Maybe some of the other panelists have some experience with that.
Yeah, you're right, Nathan. There's another maybe can of worms and a whole other discussion possibly. maybe let's broaden the question a little bit. There were some questions about just how can DOTs or agencies better collaborate with mapping companies to ensure that you know, if there is a closure somewhere or there's something that needs to be notified. And there was a related question to that about how can we even contact someone at these companies? So kind of where do you start with developing that partnership? That's I think the starting point, getting a contact or starting to understand better how you can you know, have that two-way relationship with these huge, you know, tech companies. So I don't know if Nathan or Todd or Denise, what would you suggest to kind of for an agency or for someone kind of starting out in this? How would you kind of begin?
Yeah, I guess for North Carolina, we're one of the states that we talk often with the other states about this. It's maybe Denise, if you wanted to give some recommendations for some new states dealing with this issue. There's a lot of contacts at the agencies, but the contact like the contact for Google Maps, for example, might be different by region. But as for North Carolina, we maintain our own contact. You might call it a contact matrix that shows for any given navigation provider or traffic information service, we have dedicated contact information that we have in procedures to go through that. So I recommend each state should develop one of their own like that. And I think Denise has been working on some guidelines for recommendations for that. And even some collaboration sharing among states for this kind of information as well.
Yeah, to follow up on what Nathan is saying is there's a couple different things you can do. I mean, I know that Waze we've mapped, no pun intended here, to steal from Todd, the Waze Map Editors with the state agencies. So that way the states they know who their map editors are, because I think there's a step one in terms of things like road closures, because the only real way right now, if you don't have a feed, for example, you get a road closure into Waze is through the map editor. So by linking them together, they can start to develop a working relationship with the Waze Map Editor. The next level then is to go further up the chain to say, okay, how do my data feeds work with, and that's kind of where in our coalition we've gone to work with the Waze engineering team to say, okay, these are some of the fields we need. This is what we want. This is what WZDX provides us. This is how we can do it. So that's kind of where I think the secret to what we've done in building a relationship is the fact that Waze and Google will be very upfront with you. They do not want to hear from 50 different states about the same thing. So I think the success of the coalition was the fact that we kind of come together as one unified voice. You may have one meeting. We give them here's our ticketed issues. It's all succinct, concise in one fell swoop, as opposed to 16 different states all saying the same thing. So I think part of it has to do with the fact that if you can, wherever you're located, create a regional operating group. We have a Waze technical working group to come together and say, can you help us? I think that may be a way to foster the relationship. And I did see a couple things in the chat box about truck routes. They will be upfront with you, absolutely straightforward, and say, we don't do trucks. This Waze should not be used for trucks. If it's used for trucks, it shouldn't be. They're very upfront with the fact that it's a passenger vehicle app. Go to DriveWise or go to some other app that deals with trucks. So it's a yin and a yang. I think, but you've got to get in there and develop the relationship with them, but doing it through one unified voice might be a key. Hope that helps.
Yes, I think it does. I like how you started with step one, working with your map editor, then two, working with a regional or some kind of data feed issue. Yeah. So, and there was a question that came in. Denise, do you mind quickly summarizing what the WZDX is?
Oh,
for those that may not be familiar.
WZDX is the Work Zone Data Exchange. It's championed by USDOT. I think the Bureau of Transportation Statistics was really pushing it forward, but it is a it is a data format that was originally built for planned events like construction events, and it's a common standard. There was a grant that was given out to the states. I think 20 states received grants to build this kind of data format, and so WZDX is now expanding into real-time incident data and others. So the point being is that this gives you a reference to start to develop a common data format that Waze has agreed to work towards. And again, they built infrastructure to accept that data. Okay, so that's what WZDX is. If you Google it, there's a lot of working committees, pretty extensive project that they built, and they're moving out of what we call the planned events, which was focused on construction, and moving into things like incident data, or they're looking at formatting for capturing IT field devices, things like that. So does that make sense?
Yeah,
Okay.
thanks, Denise. And
Sure.
there was a question that came in, why isn't the USDOT our voice on this issue? And the WZDX is one effort that the Federal Highway Administration has been working on to create this kind of data specification for work zones that can be used for this area. And there's plans to expand that beyond just work zone information to other kinds of non-recurring events and data as well. So there are some efforts for some national kind of specifications in this area, but they are a work in progress right now. Let's see, a question that came in for Todd. So what's the percentage of false alarms from Waze? Is that something you're tracking? And you talked a little bit how you do filtering. Can you maybe summarize that to help to kind of combat this issue of false alarms?
Yeah, we're always looking at data. Part of that's looking at that combination of data with the Waze alert and what's occurring on the segment of roadway according to Google Maps or INRIX. We're always looking for the best scenario there. If we see a backup, it's an immediate indicator we're sending somebody. Something's going on there, one way or the other. When they aren't there, it's a little bit of the waiting game. Wait a few minutes. A lot of times those false alerts will go away based on thumbs down through Waze, something like that. Sometimes they're there. Sometimes we'll get a call on them. It happens. As I mentioned, we had at least 11-minute delay in an area of Western Pennsylvania until we actually got a call on something. So that's one thing we're measuring. Everybody wants more data, more data. Unfortunately, we're at a position now, we need a more enhanced CAD system, more options, more check boxes, opportunities to get those measurements in here. There is a percentage of those false calls. Most of those that get dispatched, we send units on are not, but there are false incidents that come in. I agree with what Denise said, the Waze comment on truck traffic. Yeah, absolutely, they don't deal with trucks. They'll tell you, we don't want anything to do with it. Oh, but we have bridge heights, we can tighten up. We don't want anything to do with truck navigation. We know truckers use it. Should they be using it? No. So they end up on streets that they shouldn't be on, and I get that. Some local communities, as she said, work with the Waze Map Editors. Sometimes there's more details about that segment of roadway where people shouldn't be traveling. You can pass that information along to the editors. Maybe it's not classified right. They now include lane widths and et cetera in some of their mapping details. So any information like that they don't have that could be more accurate would be helpful for routing. I saw a recent question. Sorry, I apologize. Don't mean to ramble on. I'm going into all these questions I saw here, just trying to answer them, knock them out. I saw a question about duplication of efforts with WME and our own ATMS or CAD. I don't see it as a duplication because there's other folks, we have the staff to efficiently edit those things and take care of them. Sometimes it can seem overwhelming when you're busy, if you have a ton of closures going on during winter conditions maybe, but a simple feed can't currently cover some of our detour routes. If we close a section of roadway from Carlisle to Breezewood, there's 3 exits between there. We can't automatically close each westbound acceleration ramp between Carlisle and Breezewood, or vice versa. Depending on which interchange the incident is between, we may or may not be allowing traffic to travel one direction or the other, and we can go into the editor and close those ramps. Other navigation apps are taking you off at Carlisle, and they may reroute you to our next interchange, which is also closed. It's something we've been able to accomplish with Waze through the map editor that you can't do automatically.
I agree with Todd. I think it's a balance, because I think in some cases, in some states or some areas, there's so much that comes in, they can't, it's overwhelming to do it on the map editor. And therefore, then they end up moving to some sort of automated feed. I think Florida would be a perfect example of that over the years. But again, I think it's really a basis of, you know, what your system and how your system's set up and how you can manage, what your resources and staffing are. I think, Mike, this came from Ncdot. I think you guys at one point had a Waze desk. You don't have any more. And given that you're out of Boston, it can be extremely overwhelming, I think, when you have all that stuff going on. So again, it's kind of a yin and yang.
Yeah. Thanks, Todd, for getting to that question. That was going to be my next one. So you beat me to it. One that came in for you, Denise, is the number of Waze impressions easily available. It seems like a useful piece of information to have.
Yeah, I can ask the question. Some of the slides you've seen, I've had to sign an NDA on certain things, and some of the stuff is, some of this data is older so that I'm allowed to use it. I can certainly ask that question. One of the guys will be in a meeting with me tomorrow, so I can ask the question if they can post that. I don't know if that's something that they will do or not. You can ask them.
Okay, that's fair. Well, I think at this point, let's go ahead and wrap up the Q&A session. Great discussion, great questions. We have a couple additional poll questions, if you don't mind taking the time as we wrap up here. What other topics would you like to see in upcoming webinars? If you have any ideas about that, we're always taking ideas in the spirit of crowdsourcing, hearing from the crowd what are interesting topics in this area. So that's the first question. I don't know if Luana, you can bring up two questions at once or not, but
I have them separate. We'll have to wait.
okay.
So give a
So-
few minutes for this one, and then we'll go on the next one.
Okay, a few seconds, maybe not.
Yeah,
Gotta
exactly.
wrap up in a couple minutes here, so. Yeah, that idea of a neighborhood cut through traffic seems to have hit a vein, so maybe that could be a future topic as well. Okay, maybe we could pull up the next one. Let's see, would you recommend this webinar series scale of 1 to 9 to a friend or colleague? So that should be an easy one to answer. And then the third one, you could bring that up. Luana, how informative or useful were the presentations today? The scale of 1 to 5. Thank you for your responses. And if we'll go back and look at the Q&A pod, if there were any questions we didn't get to, apologize, and we'll follow up via email if there were any unanswered ones there. So you can go ahead and close that one down. As we wrap up here, just a reminder, there's our website has all of our publicly available resources and information. There's also a link to the webinar series where all the previous 20 webinars are recorded. The presentations are available for download. And you can also subscribe on our website to our e-news, where we do not spam you, but we might send you a monthly or every other month email with newsletter of information and happenings in our initiative and news from other states and local agencies about what's new with them with crowdsourcing for operations. So with that, I would like to thank our presenters again. Again, great job, Nathan, Todd, and Denise. Thanks for taking the time and putting those presentations together and sharing your stories about how you're using crowdsourcing data and engaging with navigation app providers. And on behalf of myself and my co-leads, Greg Jones and Ralph Volpe, thank you for joining us. This webinar recording will be available soon on our website and NOCO's website. So have a great rest of your day. Thank you, Luana, again for hosting and doing a great job organizing this.
Thank you,
that-
James. Thanks, everybody.
Great. Yep. Thanks, Luana. See you guys all later. Goodbye.
Bye.